Another week of NFL football is in the books, and you know what that means. It's time for the Sports Ball Network's NFL Week 3 breakdown. Kicking things off Thursday night, we had the San Francisco 49ers take on the New York Giants, and the 49ers ended up pulling away in this one 30-12. San Francisco looks really good. There's not really much I need to talk about here. The offense is moving pretty smoothly on all cylinders, and the defense looks great. The New York Giants, on the other hand, do not look very good. That contract that they gave Daniel Jones earlier this season does not look like it's paying off. And New York doesn't really have an out until 2025. If things don't turn around quickly, things are going to get ugly in the Big Apple. Starting off with our 1 p.m. slate of games on Sunday, the Atlanta Falcons fell to the Detroit Lions 20-6. The Lions had a bounce back game that they sorely needed and dispatched this Falcons team pretty quickly, much like you would expect a contender to do. The offense looked great and the defense really stepped up. This team is absolutely legitimate. The Falcons, on the other hand, although they are 2-1, have more questions than Detroit does. Desmond Ridder and the offense had a very bad day, and that has to call into question Arthur Smith's ability to lead a modern NFL offense. The run game in particular only had 17 looks, which is not something Atlanta usually does. The defense also struggled to really stop Detroit at any point throughout this game. And if the Falcons are going to seriously compete for the playoffs in the future, both units need to step up. Through the first 3 quarters of this game, it was all Saints as New Orleans jumped out to a 17-0 lead. However, that's not how this game ended up, and quarterback Derek Carr sprained his AC joint, rendering him out for the rest of the game. With Jameis Winston now leading the offense, New Orleans wasn't able to put up any sort of resistance and ended up falling to the Packers 18-17. Of course, New Orleans defense has to take some of the blame here for allowing the Packers to have this fourth quarter comeback, but the real concern for the Saints is the offense. If Derek Carr misses any sort of time, they're going to struggle with Jameis Winston under center. However, I do want to talk about the Packers here as well. Jordan Love, through his first 3 games, has proven that he is able to succeed Aaron Rodgers and at least somewhat succeed. The Packers' gamble seemingly has paid off so far, and the team is off to a strong 2-1 start. Up next is a divisional clash on Thursday night with Detroit, which I think will show a lot about this team and show if they're really going to continue to compete this year. This game is the first one that we're going to be talking about this week that really wasn't much of a contest. The Houston Texans surprisingly dominated the Jacksonville Jaguars throughout this entire game. And although the final score shows that it was 37-17, it really wasn't that close for the vast majority of it. Rookie quarterback CJ Stroud has absolutely proven that he is going to be a star in this league. He has thrown for 906 yards and 4 touchdowns with no interceptions or turnovers through his first 3 games. What's even more surprising is that he's doing this with the Houston Texans missing the majority of their starting offensive line due to injury. With most of the starters expected back by week 5, one can only imagine how scary this Texans offense is going to look. Meanwhile, in Jacksonville, I think it's officially time to panic. The Jaguars are 1-2 and have now lost games that they should have won. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence does not look particularly great, and it seems that he's having a bit of a slump, which in and of itself is fine. He's still a young quarterback, and he still has a lot of room to grow. However, the offense isn't doing him any favors either, and Press Taylor absolutely should not be calling plays at this point. Luckily, Coach Doug Peterson knows this, and he's since taken over the play calling duties from this week onwards. Let's see if Jacksonville is able to recover from this one. In the rainy weather in this game, it was the Colts that were able to pull away in overtime against the Baltimore Ravens 22-19, with running back Zach Moss seeing 30 carries and running for 122 yards to go along with 2 receptions for 23 yards and a touchdown. This game was defined by the Indianapolis Colts run game. And the Colts really were able to force their will upon Baltimore all game long. In addition, wide receiver Michael Pittman also had a relatively good performance, hauling in 9 of his 11 targets for 77 yards. Rookie Josh Downs continued to impress with 8 receptions for 57 yards. Through the first 3 weeks, it's clear that this Indianapolis Colts team is a lot better than people gave them credit for. And all credit should go to Coach Shane Steichen, who has seemingly turned around this offense overnight. Once rookie quarterback Anthony Richardson comes back, the sky's the limit for this unit. Meanwhile, Baltimore looked pretty uncharacteristic in this game, but we can chalk it up partly due to the weather and partly due to an off day by Justin Tucker, who actually missed a field goal, which would have won Baltimore the game. This Colts team, though, does look pretty good, so we can just chalk this one up to Baltimore having a bad week against a good team. I fully expect the Ravens to be fine moving forward. Buffalo Bills did what everybody thought they would do and dispatched the Washington Commanders 37-3 in what was one of several blowouts this weekend. Buffalo once again looked great on offense. Josh Allen threw for 218 yards, a touchdown, and ran for another score. But the real surprise has been James Cook so far, who ran for 98 yards and hauled in 2 receptions for 14 yards. Buffalo seems to have finally found a run game to complement Josh Allen in the passing game, which is something they desperately needed since 2020. Going into the season, the run game on offense was by far Buffalo's biggest question. So the fact that it seems to finally have found an answer is huge for this team. Washington, meanwhile, crashed back down to earth as Sam Howell threw 4 interceptions and had a very, very bad day overall. He was routinely missing open throws and looked rattled. But to be fair, Buffalo has had a great defense for the past few years now, and it was pretty much Sam Howell's 4th start in the league. So chalk this one up to growing pains. Washington might not be as good as people thought they were after 2 weeks, but in my mind, they're still a frisky wild card contender. Speaking of blowout games, the Miami Dolphins absolutely shellacked the Denver Broncos 70-20 at home. Miami could have had 73 points in this game, but they elected not to set the NFL record for most points scored in a game and instead opted to show a single shred of mercy. Through these first 3 weeks, Miami has easily been the best team in the NFL. Tua is probably the MVP frontrunner, and they did this all without Jalen Waddle. This team is absolutely legitimate, and at this point, might be the Super Bowl favorites. Then again, it's 3 weeks in, and they have a tough test against Buffalo next week, so we'll see a lot about this team and what they're really made of. Denver, on the other hand, should be absolutely embarrassed. This was by far the worst performance I have ever seen out of an NFL team ever. They really, I think, at this point need to hit a hard reset. The worst part is, though, for Denver, they may not even be the worst team in the NFL. That's the team they play next week, the Chicago Bears, who I will be talking about later on in this video. But overall, the main takeaway for Denver is this. Whatever you're doing is not working. And if you do not fix it fast, this season is going to quickly spiral downhill if it has not already. Embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. The Browns showed everybody on Sunday once again why they should be considered one of the better teams in the AFC and one of the favorites to take the AFC North in their 27-3 victory over Tennessee. Browns defense is at this point a top 5 unit and is absolutely legitimate. And combined with an offense that can move the ball down the field and be efficient for the most part, this team is quickly coming into form early on in the season. Tennessee, meanwhile, at this point, should be looking towards their future. Ryan Tannehill put in another bad game, throwing for only 104 yards. And Derrick Henry, normally the heart and soul of this team and its offense, only managed 20 on the ground. It's a bad performance overall by Tennessee this week. And really, sitting at 1-2 to start the season, there's not much the Titans have done so far this season to inspire any confidence in their fan base for any sort of playoff push this year. If I'm the coaching staff at this point, I'm considering starting Will Levis and looking towards the future. In a game where both teams actively tried to lose at multiple points throughout it, the Los Angeles Chargers managed to get their first win in a 28-24 victory over the Minnesota Vikings. Let's start with the Vikings here. Kirk Cousins once again put up an MVP level performance, and really he should take exactly 0% of the blame for this loss. Yes, he had an interception to seal the game away, but that interception actually wasn't his fault as it went right through the hands of tight end TJ Hawkinson and into the hands of the defender. Every time Kirk Cousins does something good, it seems that his teammates do two things that are not good. From fumbles to drops to just overall ineptitude, it seems that the Vikings are finding new and inventive ways to lose football games each and every week, despite the fact that they have both a quarterback and a wide receiver playing at MVP levels. The Chargers, meanwhile, have to be pleased to get a win on the board, but have to be upset at losing star wide receiver Mike Williams to an ACL tear for the year. Quarterback Justin Herbert, though, had a standout performance, completing 40 of his 47 pass attempts for 405 yards to go along with 3 touchdowns. But this week, overall, was the Keenan Allen show. He was absolutely dominant. He caught 18 of his 20 targets for 215 yards and even threw a 49-yard touchdown pass. If the Chargers are going to keep winning games, it's going to be because of this offense and because of the stars on it. The defense, again, did not look particularly great this week, so the offense, as always, is going to have to step up for Los Angeles. In a game that took us back to the year 1944, the New England Patriots managed to grind out a 15-10 win over the New York Jets. The Jets at this point look like one of the worst teams in the NFL, and quarterback Zach Wilson only managed to complete 18 of his 36 pass attempts for 157 yards. I have to feel for the guy. He looks pretty rattled out there. But into the fourth quarter, the Jets still had a chance to win this game, but just could not pull it out. With the signing of Trevor Siemian this week, one can only imagine that Zach Wilson is not going to be starting for this team come week 4. His time in New York is definitely controversial, but it looks like it's coming to an end. Meanwhile, New England saw Bill Belichick go deep into his hat of defensive tricks to pull out this win. And although the offense did not look particularly great against a strong Jets defense, there are some encouraging signs. Mac Jones did have a overall decent day, throwing for 201 yards and a touchdown, and the run game had a good day as well, as the Patriots ran for 139 yards between their two running backs in Ezekiel Elliott and Ramondre Stevenson. Like we said last week, New England's going to be a frisky team and can never really be counted out, so long as they have Bill Belichick scheming on the sidelines. Kicking off the afternoon slate of games, I want to first go over the Seahawks 37-27 victory over the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers offense actually looked better with veteran Andy Dalton leading the way, and the wily veteran overall had a very strong game, throwing for 361 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wide receiver Adam Thielen continues to be a constant for this offense, and he hauled in 145 yards and a touchdown on 11 receptions. But that's about where the positives end on offense. The Panthers, between running backs Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders, only ran for 26 yards today. That's probably a big reason why they lost, and if the offense, particularly the running game, continues to not look that great outside of Adam Thielen, it's going to struggle mightily when rookie quarterback Bryce Young returns. Seattle went to 2-1 on the season following this win, and really this week was about running back Kenneth Walker, who ran for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as hauled in 59 yards through the air. Geno Smith looked efficient, throwing for 296 yards and a touchdown, but he also had an interception, and there were times where he looked a little erratic. But still, it was a strong performance from Seattle, and they are firmly in the wild card and NFC West race through these first three games. The Arizona Cardinals shocked the world on Sunday and pretty handily defeated the Dallas Cowboys 28-16. It took all of 2 weeks for the Dallas Cowboys hype train to die, and to that, I say good riddance. Dak Prescott did not look particularly great, and although running back Tony Pollard put in another good game, rushing for 122 yards, it wasn't enough, as the strength of this team, the defense, pretty much fell apart when faced with the Arizona rushing offense. James Conner ran for 98 yards and a touchdown. Keontae Ingram also contributed on the ground, but it was quarterback Josh Dobbs who ran for 55 yards on 6 scrambles. Josh Dobbs also was efficient through the air, throwing for 189 yards and 1 touchdown and completing 17 of his 21 pass attempts. Arizona's frisky. We said this last week, and they'll continue to be frisky. When Kyler comes back, they could even potentially be a sneaky team to sneak into the wild card round. And really, that's a testament to a coaching staff that I thought would struggle a bit more than they have so far. I'll admit it. I was not a fan of Jonathan Gannon and his staff, and so far, I've been proven wrong. Kudos to you. Hey guys, did you know Taylor Swift was at the Chiefs game? Because she was. And the NFL has most definitely made sure that people know that. And speaking of that game, let's talk about it real quick. The Kansas City Chiefs dismantled the hapless Chicago Bears 41-10 in a game that probably should have been 82-0 if the Chiefs were taking it seriously. Patrick Mahomes did his usual thing. He threw for 3 touchdowns, and Travis Kelce got his first score of the year, which Taylor Swift, who was at this football game, mind you, was very impressed by. One can imagine, though, that Taylor was a lot less impressed by the Chicago Bears, who looked like an absolute dumpster fire, both on and off the field. Want to know who else is probably not impressed by the Chicago Bears right now? Caleb Williams, who may return to college should Chicago get the number 1 pick. Don't look, Bears fans. Things are not going to be pretty for you for some time. The Pittsburgh Steelers improved their record to 2-1 on the season by dispatching the Las Vegas Raiders 23-10 on Sunday Night Football. If you are a Kenny Pickett truther, you have to be encouraged by this game. He looked relatively good, completing 16 of his 28 pass attempts for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns. If Kenny can keep this level of play up and Pittsburgh's defense continues to be its dominant self, no one will be surprised if Mike Tomlin manages to squeeze another winning season out of this roster. The Raiders, on the other hand, seemed to have struggled for most of the night until they mounted what looked to be a potential last-minute comeback. Quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, though, however, made sure to target Davante Adams heavily, and the star wide receiver had 172 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. Speaking of Davante Adams, he might have subtly hinted at the fact that he wants to get traded. Something to monitor here. Through the first 3 weeks of the season, the Philadelphia Eagles have not looked like their dominant self, but a win is a win, and Philadelphia can't complain after taking home a 25-11 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Philadelphia's offense looks somewhat off, at least through the air, and quarterback Jalen Hurts does not look like his usual MVP self, but I believe that's a combination of a change in the offensive coordinator and early season rust. Hopefully, by the time next week rolls around, he will have improved and everything will be all right, so that the collective heart rate of Philadelphia can go back down to normal. The rushing game, however, for Philadelphia once again shined, and DeAndre Swift looks to have been a steal as the running back ran for 130 yards and overall looked explosive. Philadelphia defense, too, has to be encouraged by its performance as it held the Buccaneers to only 11 points and particularly held wide receiver Mike Evans to only 60 receiving yards. The Philadelphia defense also had several opportunities for turnovers that they just weren't able to capitalize on, in part due to the weather. But still, overall, a very strong performance from the vast majority of Philadelphia's units here. Tampa Bay fell a bit back down to earth, and Baker Mayfield looked like everybody thought he would. He had a relatively erratic performance, and he had several passes that should have been picked off. But still, at 2-1, Tampa Bay can't complain right now, given that Derek Carr is hurt and the Atlanta Falcons seemingly have struggles on offense they need to work through. Tampa is still a strong contender in this division. Wrapping things up with the second Monday Night Football game, the Cincinnati Bengals got a much-needed 19-16 victory over the Los Angeles Rams. Ja'Marr Chase finally got out of his early season slump, catching 12 of his 15 targets for 141 yards, and Joe Mixon had a strong day on the ground, rushing for 65 yards and a touchdown. Quarterback Joe Burrow does look off, though. He does not look like his usual pinpoint accurate self, and he made several mistakes, including a bad interception. Wide receiver T. Higgins is also seeing his fair share of struggles, catching only 2 of his 8 targets for 21 yards. The heroes of this game, though, for the Bengals has to be the defense. They had 2 interceptions and 6 sacks and overall terrorized quarterback Matthew Stafford all game long. The Rams, falling to 1-2, have not looked very good on offense these past couple of weeks, and Matthew Stafford, constantly pressured in the pocket, has struggled. The quarterback threw for 2 interceptions and completed only 18 of his 33 pass attempts. Still, the young wide receiver core of Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua looks very good, and Kyren Williams had a ton of opportunities, particularly in the passing game, for this offense. The offensive skill positions are still relatively young, and they still have a lot of room to grow. So overall, Los Angeles Rams fans have to be encouraged by their performance so far. The Los Angeles defense also put up a relatively lackluster performance, only getting 2 sacks and a single interception on a struggling Joe Burrow and Cincinnati offense. But they showed that they have some room to improve and that there is some potential here. The Rams might not win much this season, but overall, no one really expected them to. So the fact that they're showing some promising signs early in the season has to be encouraging for them and their long-term future. Thanks again for watching the Sportsball Network's Week 3 NFL recap, and we'll see you in Week 4.